In the abandoned industrial wasteland of Eastern Europe, a legendary sniper was about to face their greatest enemy. What started as a routine extraction mission took a shocking turn when they came face to face with a surveillance drone in a toxic tunnel. Elena Kozlov wasn't your typical war correspondent. For 3 years, she had spent her life as the Phantom, known only as the Angel of Death, known for impossible shots that eliminated high-value targets from distances that defied belief. When she encountered enemy forces closing in and was forced to remove her protective mask, she had no idea she was walking into a psychological trap that would shatter her carefully constructed identity. Elena's split-second decision to survive would lead to a propaganda war that would redefine how the world saw both her legend and her humanity. What began as another successful elimination would become a battle for her very soul. The conflict zone would never be the same after the myth became flesh and the hunter became the hunted. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The acrid smoke burned Elena's throat as she pressed herself against the rusted machinery, her rifle steady despite the chaos erupting around the abandoned textile factory. Through her tactical visor, she could see David Chen crouched behind a collapsed concrete pillar, his spotting scope tracking movement in the courtyard below. 3 years of operating together had forged an almost telepathic connection between them. She knew without looking that his jaw was clenched tight, the way it always got when their extraction plans went sideways. "Angel, we've got hostiles advancing from 3 directions," David whispered into his comm, using her call sign with the same reverence that had made her legend. "Extraction bird is down. Repeat, Falcon is down." Elena's breath came measured and controlled, even as she processed the implications. The helicopter wreckage smoldered 200 meters away, their lifeline reduced to twisted metal and shattered dreams of a clean exit. She had eliminated the target, another high-value asset who thought himself untouchable in his concrete fortress. The mission was complete, but completion meant nothing if they didn't survive to report it. "Copy that, Watchman," she replied, her voice modulated by the voice scrambler inbuilt into her tactical mask. For 3 years, that device had been more than protection against chemical weapons. It had been the guardian of her most precious secret. The enemy knew the Angel of Death by reputation alone, a ghost who struck from impossible distances, a phantom whose very name sent seasoned soldiers diving for cover. If only they knew. A spray of automatic fire shattered the industrial windows above them, raining glass like deadly snow. Elena felt the familiar calm settle over her, the strange serenity that had made her untouchable on a dozen battlefields. She was Elena Kozlov, former Olympic shooting champion. But in this moment, she was something else entirely. She was the myth she'd crafted with surgical precision and ruthless dedication. "Movement southwest stairwell," David reported, his voice tight with controlled tension. "Squad-size element ascending to your level." Elena's mind cataloged tactical options with machine-like efficiency. The factory's layout provided multiple firing positions, but limited escape routes. The lower levels were compromised, and their planned extraction point was now a smoking crater, which left the maintenance tunnel, she said, already moving. Industrial level, beneath the old dyeing stations. David's head snapped toward her, concern flickering across his features. "Angel, that tunnel's been sealed since the chemical leak in 31. It's still contaminated." "Then they won't expect us to use it." Elena was already calculating angles and distances, her mind parsing the facility's blueprints from memory. They moved like shadows through the skeletal remains of the factory, her rifle leading the way while David covered their six. The sound of boots on metal grew closer with each passing moment. Their pursuers were organized, methodical, professional soldiers rather than the usual conscripts. Someone wanted the Angel of Death badly enough to commit their best assets. The entrance to the maintenance level gaped before them like a mouth, half collapsed from artillery damage and cloaked in chemical fog that made Elena's eyes water even through her protective filters. Warning signs in 3 languages screamed danger, but danger was a relative concept when the alternative was capture. "Stay close," Elena whispered, leading David into the industrial underworld. The tunnel stretched ahead of them, a concrete throat lined with corroded pipes and the ghostly remnants of safety equipment. Each breath burned, even through their filtration systems, and Elena could feel the toxic fog clawing at her lungs. Behind them, she heard their pursuers discovering their trail, voices echoing down the maintenance shaft with renewed urgency.
"Contact. They're in the tunnel." The words ricocheted off the walls, followed by the distinctive whine of flashbang grenades. Elena's world exploded into light and sound, her carefully maintained equilibrium shattered by the concussive blast. She stumbled forward, David's hand on her shoulder the only anchor in the chaos. Her filtration mask, already pushed beyond its design limits, gave an electronic whine of protest. Then, the unthinkable happened. The mask's seal failed. Elena's lungs seized as toxic vapors flooded her respiratory system, her body's automatic responses overriding 3 years of trained discipline. She clawed at the straps, her fingers finding the release mechanism even as her vision blurred. The mask came away with a soft hiss, revealing her face to the harsh industrial lighting for the first time since she'd become the Angel of Death. "Elena!" David's voice carried raw terror as he reached for his emergency medical kit. But the damage was already done. Through the swirling chemical fog, Elena caught the distinctive red blink of an enemy surveillance drone. Its camera focused directly on her face. For a handful of seconds that stretched into eternity, she stared directly into the lens, her carefully constructed persona crumbling with each recorded frame. She was no longer a ghost. She was flesh and blood, vulnerable human, and undeniably female. David pressed his own mask over her face, their escape becoming a desperate rush through the remaining tunnel system. Behind them, she could hear excited voices transmitting coordinates and descriptions, their pursuers energized by an intelligence coup that would rewrite the entire strategic situation. They emerged at the river outlet 40 minutes later, gasping and chemical burned, but alive. David's portable comm crackled with extraction updates. A secondary pickup was inbound, their command having monitored the tactical frequency. But Elena barely heard the words. Her mind was fixated on a single terrible certainty. Everything she'd built was about to come crashing down. 3 hours later, in a sterile command bunker 200 kilometers from the front lines, Viktor Petrov stared at the high-resolution imagery on his monitor with the fascination of a man discovering a new species of butterfly. The Angel of Death's face gazed back at him, young, female, with eyes that held depths he'd never expected. For 2 years, Viktor had been hunting what he believed was his counterpart, a master sniper whose psychological warfare had cost him more strategic assets than conventional artillery. He'd built elaborate psychological profiles, constructed detailed behavioral models, all based on the assumption that his quarry was cut from familiar cloth. Now, everything had changed. Viktor's fingers traced the outline of Elena's face on the screen, his academic mind already spinning new possibilities. The Angel of Death wasn't just a skilled sniper. She was a woman who'd spent 3 years fooling everyone, including him. The implications were staggering, the psychological dimensions unprecedented. "Sir," his aide's voice seemed to come from very far away. "The propaganda division is requesting immediate approval for broadcast. They want to release the images within the hour." Viktor smiled, the expression carrying no warmth whatsoever. "Tell them to prepare a comprehensive campaign. I want every frequency flooded, every network saturated. The world is about to meet the real Angel of Death." As Elena's extraction helicopter carried her toward an uncertain future, Viktor's propaganda machine began its work. Within hours, her face would be broadcast across enemy networks, her gender dissected by analysts and commentators who'd never fired a shot in anger. The careful myth she'd constructed was about to become raw material for a psychological war she'd never anticipated fighting. The Angel of Death had been unmasked, and nothing would ever be the same. The helicopter's rotors still echoed in Elena's ears as her boots touched the concrete landing pad of forward operating base Meridian. The familiar weight of her rifle across her back felt different now, not lighter or heavier, but somehow foreign, as if the weapon itself had sensed the seismic shift in her identity. David walked beside her, his usual post-mission banter replaced by a protective silence that spoke volumes about the magnitude of their situation. Colonel Marcus Reeves waited at the edge of the landing zone, his weathered face a mask of controlled concern. At 52, Reeves had seen enough combat to recognize when a soldier's world had fundamentally changed, and the tension radiating from Elena's rigid posture told him everything he needed to know about the mission's true cost. Kozlov Chen, debriefing room now. His voice carried the clipped authority that had kept his unit alive through 18 months of brutal urban warfare. But Elena caught something else in his tone, a subtle shift that made her stomach clench with anticipation.
Reeves activated the room's security protocols with practiced efficiency, the electronic whine of signal jammers filling the air. Target neutralized at 13:47 hours, Elena began, her voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. Primary extraction failed due to enemy anti-aircraft fire. Secondary extraction successful via maintenance tunnel system. Elena. Reeves' use of her first name stopped her mid-sentence, the informality carrying more weight than any shouted order. We need to talk about what happened in that tunnel. The silence stretched between them like a tripwire, loaded with implications that none of them wanted to voice. Elena's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the only visible crack in her composure. Sir, my tactical mask malfunctioned due to chemical exposure. Standard equipment failure under extreme conditions. Each word was precisely measured, as if she could rebuild her shattered cover through sheer force of will. Colonel, the surveillance footage is already being broadcast across every enemy frequency, Reeves interrupted, his tone heavier than Elena had ever heard it. He activated the room's display screen, and Elena's world tilted on its axis. Her own face stared back at her from what was clearly enemy propaganda, the image frozen at the moment her mask had come away. The production values were sophisticated, professional graphics, multiple camera angles, and a narrator whose voice carried the smooth confidence of a man who believed he was delivering a death blow to enemy morale. The legendary Angel of Death, revealed at last as Elena Kozlov, former Olympic shooter turned military asset. How many of her claimed victories were real? How many were manufactured propaganda to boost Allied morale? The evidence suggests that the Ghost's greatest weapon wasn't skill. It was the fear created by a carefully constructed lie. Elena felt something cold and sharp twist in her chest as the broadcast continued, dissecting her service record with surgical precision. Statistics flashed across the screen, her confirmed kills analyzed and questioned by enemy intelligence analysts who'd never held a rifle in combat. Every shot she'd taken, every mission she'd completed, reduced to data points in a psychological warfare campaign designed to destroy not just her reputation, but her very sense of self. "Turn it off," she said quietly. Reeves complied, but the damage was done. The silence that followed felt like a funeral shroud, heavy with the weight of everything that had been lost in a single moment of human vulnerability. "Elena, I need you to understand something." Reeves leaned forward across the metal table. "This changes everything. Command is concerned about your continued operational effectiveness. There are questions about whether you should remain in active theater." The words hit Elena like physical blows. After 3 years of being their most valuable strategic asset, she was now a liability to be managed rather than a weapon to be deployed. She could see it in Reeves's eyes. The man who'd fought to get her assigned to sniper operations was now calculating how to protect her from the consequences of her own success. "Sir, my tactical metrics haven't changed. My accuracy rating, my mission completion percentage. Your psychological profile has, And right now, that matters more than your kill count. As if summoned by his words, the briefing room door opened to admit a woman Elena had never seen before. She was in her late 30s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to reading minds rather than maps. Her uniform bore the insignia of a captain, but her eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen too much human wreckage. Captain Sofia Ruiz, the woman introduced herself, extending a hand that Elena reluctantly shook. I'm a combat psychologist, specializing in high-stress operational environments. Colonel Reeves has asked me to conduct a fitness evaluation. Elena's blood ran cold. A psychological evaluation could end her career with a single recommendation. 3 years of perfect service records meant nothing if a psychologist decided she was emotionally compromised. With respect, Captain, I don't see how that's necessary. My performance in the field speaks for itself. Sophia's smile held no warmth, but no condemnation either. Just the professional neutrality of someone who'd learned to see through soldiers' defensive mechanisms. Miss Kozlov, you've just experienced a fundamental breach of operational security that compromises not only your safety, but your psychological foundation. Your entire professional identity has been publicly dismantled by enemy propaganda. If you think that doesn't require evaluation, you're not as intelligent as your service record suggests. The bluntness was like a slap, cutting through Elena's defensive posturing with surgical precision. She felt David tense beside her, his protective instincts warring with military protocol. When Elena recognized the futility of resistance. Tomorrow, 0800 hours, my office. Sophia gathered her tablet and headed for the door, pausing only to deliver one final observation. For what it's worth, Sergeant, your reputation preceded you.
You into this room. It'll take more than enemy propaganda to destroy what you built. But first, you need to figure out who you are when the myth gets stripped away. After Sophia left, the room fell silent, except for the distant sounds of base operations. Helicopters landing, vehicles moving, the controlled chaos of a military installation at war. Elena stared at the blank display screen, seeing not the gray surface, but the image of her own exposed face being dissected by enemy analysts. "Elena," Reeves said finally, his voice gentler than she'd heard since the early days of their professional relationship, "I want you to know that I believe in your abilities. Whatever doubts the brass might have, whatever psychological games the enemy is playing, your skills are real. Your service record is real. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But even as he spoke the words, Elena could hear the uncertainty beneath them. Not doubt about her abilities, but whether those abilities mattered anymore, in a war where perception had become more powerful than precision. 200 kilometers away, in a converted university lecture hall that now served as an intelligence analysis center, Viktor Petrov stood before a wall of monitors, displaying Elena's psychological profile. Charts and graphs tracked her probable emotional responses, her likely behavioral patterns, the pressure points that could be exploited to maximum effect. "Gentlemen," he addressed his team of analysts with the enthusiasm of a professor unveiling a particularly fascinating case study, "we have an unprecedented opportunity here. Elena Kozlov has spent 3 years becoming a myth, and myths have very specific psychological vulnerabilities." He gestured to a monitor displaying Elena's service record, alongside her Olympic shooting achievements. "She's constructed her entire adult identity around perfection under pressure. Her self-worth is intimately tied to her professional competence. Now we've introduced doubt into that equation. Not just external doubt, but the kind of internal questioning that can destroy a person from within." One of his analysts, a former marketing executive turned propaganda specialist, raised her hand. "What's our primary objective? Capture? Elimination?" Victor's smile was the expression of a man who'd found his life's purpose. "Neither. We're going to do something far more elegant. We're going to prove that the angel of death never existed at all. We're going to convince Elena Kozlov that her reputation was built on fear rather than skill, propaganda rather than performance. We're going to make her destroy herself. He turned back to Elena's photograph, studying the face that had haunted his strategic planning for 2 years. Now that face would become the centerpiece of the most sophisticated psychological warfare campaign of his career. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By the time we're finished, she won't trust her own abilities enough to pull a trigger. And that, gentlemen, is how you kill a legend. Not with bullets, but with doubt. As night fell over forward operating base Meridian, Elena lay in her narrow bunk staring at the ceiling, processing the day's revelations. Tomorrow would bring the psychological evaluation, followed by whatever decisions Command made about her future. But tonight, in the quiet hours between missions, she was just Elena Kozlov. No longer the angel of death, not yet whoever she was meant to become next. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't sure who that person might be. Elena's boots echoed against the polished floor of the medical wing as she approached Captain Sofia Ruiz's office at precisely 0800 hours. Sleep had been elusive, punctuated by fragmented dreams where her rifle scope showed nothing but empty crosshairs and the mocking laughter of invisible enemies. She paused before the door marked Combat Psychology, her hand hovering over the handle as if it might burn her. "Come in, Sergeant Kozlov." Sofia's voice carried through the thin walls, calm and professionally neutral. Elena wondered if psychologists practiced that tone, the way snipers practiced breathing control. The office was smaller than Elena had expected, furnished with the standard military efficiency, but softened by personal touches that spoke of Sofia's civilian background. A small succulent on the windowsill, framed photographs that had been turned face down for patient privacy, and a worn leather journal that looked more like a personal diary than military documentation. "Please, sit anywhere you're comfortable," Sofia said, gesturing to several chair options. Elena noted the tactical consideration. No chair faced away from the door, no position left her back exposed. Either Sofia understood soldiers' spatial anxieties, or she was more perceptive than most therapists. Elena chose the chair that provided the clearest sightlines to both the door and window, settling into the familiar alert relaxation that had kept her alive through countless operations. Sofia observed this ritual without comment, making a note in her tablet that Elena couldn't read from her position. "How did you sleep last night?" Sofia asked, opening with something that seemed like casual conversation, but which Elena recognized as tactical reconnaissance, probing for weaknesses, assessing psychological armor. "Fine." The lie came automatically, part of Elena's lifelong defense against appearing vulnerable.
Interesting. Most soldiers who've experienced what you have would report some sleep disruption. Hypervigilance is a normal response to having your operational security compromised. Sofia's tone remained conversational, but Elena sensed the psychological pressure building. "Tell me about the moment in the tunnel when you removed your mask." Elena's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Equipment failure under extreme conditions. Chemical exposure necessitated emergency protocols. That's what happened physically. I'm asking about what it felt like to expose your face after 3 years of anonymity. Sofia leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes fixed on Elena's with uncomfortable intensity. You've spent your entire adult military career behind a mask, literally and figuratively. What was it like to suddenly be visible? The question struck deeper than Elena had anticipated. For a moment, she was back in that toxic tunnel, feeling the burning air hit her exposed skin and knowing with crystalline certainty that everything was about to change. The vulnerability had been total, complete, like standing naked in a spotlight. It felt
Elena paused, surprising herself with the urge to tell the truth. It felt like dying. Sophia nodded as if this revelation was perfectly expected. And now, how does it feel to have your face broadcast across enemy networks, to have your identity analyzed and dissected by people who've never met you? Before Elena could answer, both women were startled by the sharp buzz of Sophia's secure communication device. The message was brief, but urgent enough to make Sophia's professional composure crack slightly. "I need you to see something," Sophia said, activating the wall-mounted display. This was broadcast on enemy frequencies approximately 30 minutes ago. Elena's blood turned to ice water as her own voice filled the room, or something that sounded unmistakably like her voice. The audio quality was professional, as if recorded during a secure communication. "Honestly, David, half those long-range kills were pure luck. The wind conditions were so unpredictable that I was basically firing blind and hoping for the best. Command wants to believe in the angel of death mythology, but between you and me, some of those reports were enhanced for morale purposes." Elena shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor with violent force. "That's not me. I never said those words." "I know," Sophia replied calmly. "The voice pattern analysis confirms it's fabricated. Very sophisticated audio synthesis, but fabricated nonetheless. The question is, knowing it's false, why are you so upset by it?" The psychological trap closed around Elena with perfect precision. Her anger at the false recording revealed exactly what Sophia needed to understand. Elena's self-worth was so intimately tied to her professional competence that even fabricated evidence of inadequacy triggered profound emotional distress. "Because they're trying to destroy everything I've built," Elena said, her voice raw with an emotion she rarely allowed herself to feel. 3 years of perfect operations, of being the weapon my country needed, and they want to reduce it all to luck and lies? And if it was luck, if some of your success was circumstantial rather than skillful, would that invalidate your service?" Sophia's question was delivered with surgical precision, cutting straight to the heart of Elena's psychological vulnerability. Elena's silence stretched long enough for Sophia to make several notes before continuing. "Sergeant, your identity has become so intertwined with professional perfection that you can't separate Elena Kozlov, the person, from the angel of death, the legend. That's not healthy for anyone, but it's potentially lethal for a soldier in active theater." The session was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. David's voice carried urgent concern as he called through the wood. "Elena, Colonel wants to see you immediately. We've got a situation." Sophia glanced at her watch. They were only 20 minutes into what should have been an hour-long evaluation. "We'll continue this tomorrow, same time." Elena was already at the door, her professional instincts overriding psychological introspection. But Sophia's final words stopped her cold. "Sergeant, the enemy's psychological warfare campaign is just beginning. If you can't separate who you are from what you do, they're going to destroy both." The briefing room was crowded with personnel Elena recognized as the base's senior sniper team leaders. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism, and Elena felt the weight of their collective assessment like a physical pressure. These were men and women who'd respected the Angel of Death's reputation. Now they were evaluating Elena Kozlov's reality. Colonel Reeves stood at the front of the room beside a tactical display showing enemy positions in the contested urban zone of Krasnodar. "We've got actionable intelligence on a high-value target, enemy logistics coordinator, responsible for supply lines that have been bleeding us dry for 6 weeks. Elena studied the tactical data with automatic precision, her mind cataloging distances, wind patterns, escape routes. The shot was challenging, but well within her capabilities. 1,800 meters across an urban canyon with multiple atmospheric variables to account for. "Range to target?" she asked, falling into familiar operational rhythms. 1820 meters. Wind variable, gusting southwest at 8 to 15 knots. Reeves paused meaningfully. Sergeant Matthews believes the shot is beyond practical engagement range given current conditions. Elena turned to look at Staff Sergeant Jake Matthews, a sniper she'd worked alongside for 2 years. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could read the doubt in his posture. He wasn't questioning the Angel of Death's abilities. He was questioning hers. "With respect, Colonel," Matthews said, his voice carrying the diplomatic phrasing that preceded professional disagreement. "The atmospheric conditions make that shot roughly 50-50 at best. Given current circumstances, might it be prudent to consider alternative approaches?" The subtext was clear. With Elena's reputation under attack, a missed shot would provide enemy propaganda with additional ammunition. Better to avoid the risk entirely than to potentially confirm their narrative of fabricated competence. Elena felt something cold and sharp twist in her chest, the same sensation she'd experienced watching the enemy broadcast. These people, her colleagues and comrades, were looking at her differently now. Not with the reverent respect accorded to a legendary sniper, but with the cautious assessment reserved for unproven assets. "I can make the shot," she said quietly. But even as the words left her mouth, she felt a treacherous whisper of doubt. What if Matthews was right? What if the conditions were beyond her abilities? What if her confidence was just another piece of mythology that reality was about to shatter? 2 hours later, positioned on a rooftop overlooking the target zone, Elena felt the familiar ritual of long-range shooting settle around her like a second skin. David lay beside her, his spotting scope tracking atmospheric conditions with the precision that had made their partnership legendary. "Winds picked up," David murmured into his throat mic. 15 knots, gusting to 20. Target is mobile, approximately 90-second window before he reaches hard cover. Elena's rifle was an extension of her body, the scope's crosshairs steady despite the challenging conditions. She'd made harder shots under worse circumstances, eliminated targets that other snipers deemed impossible. This should have been routine. But for the first time in 3 years, Elena hesitated. The doubt crept in like poison, Sophia's questions echoing in her mind alongside the enemy's fabricated audio. What if her reputation really was built on luck rather than skill? What if this shot, witnessed by spotters, recorded for after-action reports, exposed her as the fraud Viktor Petrov's propaganda claimed she was? "Elena?" David's voice carried concern. "Target's almost to cover." Her finger found the trigger, muscle memory overriding psychological paralysis. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the familiar recoil that had defined her adult life. The bullet struck concrete 2 inches to the left of the target's head. Elena had missed. In the enemy intelligence center, Viktor Petrov smiled as he reviewed the intercepted radio traffic reporting Elena's failed shot. His psychological campaign was proceeding exactly as planned. The Angel of Death was beginning to belt herself, and doubt, once introduced into a sniper's psyche, metastasized like cancer. "Sir," one of his analysts reported, "we're receiving confirmation that our target survived the assassination attempt. The Angel of Death missed." "Perfect," Viktor replied, already composing his next propaganda broadcast. "And I want you to begin compiling intelligence on Elena Kozlov's personal connections, family members, childhood friends, anyone who might provide additional psychological leverage." His aide consulted a growing file of personal information. "Sir, we've identified her sister, Elena Kozlov, working as a war correspondent in the theater, currently investigating stories about elite military units." Victor's smile widened with genuine pleasure. Elena Kozlov thought she was fighting a war against my military forces, but that was merely the opening gambit. The real battle would be fought on the terrain of her own psychology, using the people she loved as weapons against her. Excellent. Begin surveillance immediately. I want to know everything about Elena Kozlov's movements, her sources, her emotional vulnerabilities. It's time to show Elena that in psychological warfare, there are no non-combatants. As Elena returned to base that evening, the weight of her missed shot pressing down like physical burden, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since becoming the Angel of Death, she'd pulled the trigger and failed to kill. Worse, she wasn't sure if the failure was due to impossible conditions or her own eroding confidence. And in that uncertainty, Viktor Petrov had found the crack that would eventually shatter everything she'd built. Elena's hands trembled as she field-stripped her rifle in the armory, each component laid out with the obsessive precision that had defined her military career. The missed shot replayed in her mind like a broken record, the target moving left, the wind shift that she hadn't properly read.
Calculated. The concrete dust where a man's head should have exploded. 2 inches. After 3 years of surgical precision, 2 inches might as well have been 2 miles. It was the wind, David said quietly from the workbench beside her, his own equipment receiving the same meticulous attention. Gusting cross pattern caught the round at apex. Could happen anyone. But Elena knew better. The wind had been challenging, yes, but within parameters she'd navigated hundreds of times before. The problem wasn't atmospheric, it was psychological. For the first time in 3 years, she'd squeezed the trigger while questioning her own abilities, and that moment of doubt had traveled down the barrel like a virus. "I used to never miss," she whispered, more to herself than to David. The words triggered something deep in her memory, pulling her back across time to a different person, a different life. 15 years old, standing on the Olympic training range in Moscow, her coach's voice cutting through the morning air with brutal honesty. "Elena Kozlov never misses. That is who you are. That is what you do. Perfect technique, perfect control, perfect results. Anything less is failure." The Olympic Training Center had been a temple to precision. Every surface polished to mirror brightness, every shot documented and analyzed with scientific rigor. Elena had worshipped at the altar of accuracy, sacrificing social connections, romantic relationships, even sleep to maintain the perfect scores that had made her a national celebrity before her 18th birthday. She remembered the weight of gold around her neck, the camera flashes that had turned the medal ceremony into a constellation of stars. The Russian national anthem had never sounded more beautiful than in that moment when she'd stood atop the world as the youngest Olympic shooting champion in her nation's history. That was before the war, before everything changed. "Elena?" David's voice pulled her back to the present, to the armory where her disassembled rifle waited for reassembly. She forced her hands to resume their mechanical work, muscle memory guiding the weapon's reconstruction while her mind remained trapped in the past. Just thinking about Moscow, before. The transition had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first. Border tensions escalating, diplomatic solutions failing, and then the morning when she'd woken to air raid sirens and the distant thunder of artillery. The war had come to her city like a plague, consuming everything familiar and transforming the world into something unrecognizable. But it was Dmitri's death that had changed everything. The memory hit her with physical force, as vivid now as it had been 3 years ago.
her younger brother, barely 19, home on leave from his communications unit with stories of new friends and small victories. He'd been laughing at something on his phone when the missile struck their apartment building, the sound of his joy cutting off mid-syllable as the world collapsed into concrete dust and screaming metal. Elena had spent 4 hours digging through rubble with her bare hands, Olympic-trained steadiness transformed into desperate, clawing panic. When she'd finally found him, Dmitri's face had been peaceful, almost serene, but his communication equipment, the radio gear that had defined his military role, was shattered beyond recognition. The funeral was closed casket, another casualty in a war that seemed to consume young men like fuel for an insatiable engine. Elena had stood beside the grave in her black dress, accepting condolences from people who praised Dmitri's sacrifice, while promising that his death had meaning, that his service had contributed to something larger than himself. But Elena knew better. Dmitri hadn't died for ideology or strategy. He had died because someone with a rifle had decided he needed to die. And in that moment, beside her brother's grave, Elena Kozlov, the Olympic champion, had made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She would become someone with a rifle. The military recruitment office was crowded with young people driven by the same combination of patriotism and grief that had motivated Elena. But while others spoke of serving their country or defending freedom, Elena's motivations were more primal, more personal. She wanted to kill the people who had killed her brother, and she possessed the skills to do it from distances they'd never anticipate. The transformation had been deliberate and methodical. Elena studied her fellow recruits, observing how the military machine processed and categorized its human resources. Female soldiers faced scrutiny, skepticism, and protective instincts that limited their operational deployment. They were valuable, but they were also considered fragile, requiring additional resources and generating political complications that male soldiers avoided. So Elena decided to become something else entirely. The voice modulator was the first step, a piece of communication equipment she'd requisitioned through channels that didn't require detailed explanations. The tactical mask came next, justified as protection against chemical weapons, but serving a more important function as the foundation of her new identity. Even her body language had been carefully modified: broader shoulders, longer strides, the subtle aggressive posturing that military culture associated with masculine authority.
"The angel of death was born 3 years ago," she murmured, snapping the rifle's bolt carrier into place with practiced efficiency. David looked up from his own equipment. "What?" Elena realized she'd spoken aloud, her memories bleeding into the present like wounds that refused to heal. Nothing, just remembering how it started. But the memories wouldn't stop coming. She remembered her first kill, a sniper who'd been terrorizing Allied supply convoys from a church bell tower. The shot had been clean, professional, and had probably saved dozens of lives. But what she remembered most clearly was the silence afterward, the profound stillness that had settled over the battlefield when word spread that someone had eliminated the enemy sniper from an impossible distance. That had been the beginning of the myth. With each successful mission, the legend had grown, fed by whispered conversations and exaggerated reports. Elena had cultivated the mystique carefully, allowing people to project their own assumptions onto the angel of death, while never confirming or denying the masculine identity that made her more effective. The irony was bitter. In trying to avoid the limitations placed on female soldiers, she'd become the most legendary sniper in the theater, a woman whose greatest achievement was convincing everyone she was a man. "Elena," David said, his voice carrying concern that cut through her reverie like a blade. "Talk to me. What's going on in your head?
She finished reassembling her rifle and held it up to the light, checking the alignment with eyes that once earned Olympic gold. Everything was perfect, mechanically flawless, but she could feel the doubt poisoning her confidence like acid in her veins. I keep thinking about who I was before all this started. Elena Kozlov, Olympic champion, perfect scores, perfect technique, perfect control. She set the weapon down carefully, each movement precise despite the emotional chaos beneath. But what if that was never real either? What if I was always just lucky, and the war finally revealed the truth? David's expression shifted from concern to something approaching anger. That's bullshit, and you know it. I've seen you make shots that shouldn't be physically possible. I've watched you thread bullets through windows the size of dinner plates at ranges that would make other snipers weep. Your skills are real, Elena. Don't let their psychological warfare convince you otherwise. But even as David spoke, Elena could feel the seeds of doubt taking root in her psyche. Viktor Petrov's campaign wasn't just attacking her reputation, it was attacking the fundamental assumptions about herself that had sustained her through 3 years of war. Every missed shot would confirm his narrative. Every moment of hesitation would validate his psychological assault. Meanwhile, in his converted lecture hall, Viktor studied Elena's psychological profile with the fascination of a chess master contemplating a particularly elegant combination. The intercepted communications from her missed shot had provided valuable intelligence about her current mental state. But what truly excited him was the biographical information his team had compiled about her pre-war life. Olympic champion turned military asset. Such tremendous pressure to maintain perfection, such a profound fear of failure. And now we've introduced doubt into that carefully controlled environment. His aide consulted a growing file of intelligence reports. Sir, we've also confirmed information about her deceased brother, Dmitry Kozlov, killed in the early months of the conflict, communications specialist. Viktor's smile was the expression of a man who'd found the perfect psychological lever. Family trauma driving military service. Classic psychological profile for exceptional performance combined with profound emotional vulnerability. This is even better than I'd hoped. He turned to address his full team of analysts and propaganda specialists. Ladies and gentlemen, we're not just fighting Elena Kozlov, we're fighting the myth she's constructed to cope with personal trauma. Strip away that myth, and what's left is a grieving sister with a rifle and rapidly declining confidence in her own abilities. One of his junior analysts raised a tentative hand. Sir, what if our approach backfires? What if the psychological pressure makes her more dangerous rather than less? Viktor's laugh carried genuine amusement. My dear colleague, you're thinking like a military strategist when this is fundamentally a psychological operation. Elena Kozlov isn't dangerous because she's angry. She's dangerous because she believes in her own perfection. Remove that belief, introduce self-doubt, and she becomes just another soldier with good training and fading confidence. He gestured to the wall of monitors displaying Elena's tactical history. Every sniper eventually faces the moment when their reputation exceeds their abilities. We're simply accelerating that process, helping Elena reach her psychological breaking point before her body reaches its physical limits. The beauty is that she'll do most of the work herself. We just need to provide the appropriate encouragement. As Elena cleaned her equipment in the base armory, Viktor prepared his next move in the psychological chess game that would determine whether the Angel of Death would survive her own myth. But while Viktor focused on destroying Elena's confidence, he hadn't yet realized that confidence could be rebuilt from unexpected sources, including the very doubts he was so carefully cultivating. The question was whether Elena would find her strength in time to matter.
Back at the base, Elena stared at her reassembled rifle and made a decision that surprised even herself. Tomorrow, she would request another mission.
not because she was confident in her abilities, but because doubt, properly channeled, could be as powerful as certainty. The Angel of Death might have been built on myth, but Elena Kozlov was very real, and she was tired of hiding. Elena's request for another mission hung in the air of Colonel Reeves's office like smoke from a discharged weapon, heavy with implications neither of them wanted to address directly. The morning sun slanted through the reinforced windows, casting grid shadows across tactical maps that showed enemy positions advancing closer to their forward operating base with each passing day. Elena, after yesterday's... Reeves paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. After yesterday's tactical complications, perhaps it would be prudent to consider a brief operational stand-down. Time to recalibrate, reassess your mental framework. Sir, with respect, the enemy won't take a stand-down while I work through my issues. Elena's voice carried the flat determination that had made her legendary, but Reeves could hear the hairline cracks beneath the surface. If I'm going to rebuild my confidence, I need to do it under operational conditions, not in a therapy office. Before Reeves could respond, his secure communication device buzzed with an urgent message. His expression shifted as he read, professional concern replacing personal worry. There's a war correspondent briefing in 30 minutes. Allied Command wants media coverage of our counter-offensive operations, including embedded journalists with sniper teams. Elena's blood ran cold. Media attention was the last thing she needed while struggling to rebuild her psychological foundation. Sir, I request reassignment to non-media operations. Too late. The assignments went out yesterday, before your situation became apparent. Reeves's tone carried genuine regret. Elena, I need you to understand something. The brass wants positive coverage of our sniper operations, specifically to counter enemy propaganda about the Angel of Death. Like it or not, you've become a symbol they need to protect. 60 kilometers away, in the press center of Allied Command's rear headquarters, Elena Kozlov adjusted her recording equipment with the methodical precision her sister would have recognized. At 26, Elena possessed the same focused intensity that had made Elena an Olympic champion, but channeled into journalism rather than marksmanship. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and her clothes bore the practical durability of someone who'd learned to work in war zones. The briefing room filled with correspondents from major news networks, their expensive equipment and pressed uniforms contrasting sharply with Anna's well-worn gear. She'd been covering the Eastern European conflict for 8 months, building a reputation for insightful human interest stories that revealed the personal cost of geopolitical abstractions. Ladies and gentlemen, announced Major Patricia Holland, the senior public affairs officer, today's assignments will focus on our elite military units and their contributions to current operations. We have opportunities for embedded coverage with armored units, special operations teams, and sniper platoons. Anna's hand shot up immediately. I'd like to request assignment to the sniper units. There's been significant enemy propaganda recently about Allied sniper capabilities, and I think there's an important story there about the reality versus the mythology. Major Holland consulted her tablet, making notes with practiced efficiency. That would put you with forward operating base Meridian, working with some of our most decorated marksmen. Fair warning, these soldiers operate under strict operational security protocols. Your coverage will be subject to significant limitations. I understand, Major. The story I'm interested in isn't about tactical details. It's about the human element. What makes someone choose that particular specialization? How do they cope with the psychological pressures? Anna's voice carried the persuasive confidence that had earned her access to exclusive stories throughout the theater. In his intelligence center, Viktor Petrov's monitoring equipment captured Anna's words with crystal clarity, automatically flagging them for immediate analysis. His team had been tracking all media coverage related to Elena Kozlov since her exposure, but this was the first time they detected someone actively investigating the Angel of Death story. Sir,
His communications analyst reported, "We have a journalist requesting embedded coverage of Allied sniper operations specifically interested in the Angel of Death. One Elena Kozlov, freelance correspondent." Victor's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips as the surname registered. "Kozlov? Run a complete background check immediately. Family connections, personal history, everything." Within minutes, Victor's screen displayed Anna's biographical data alongside her professional portfolio. The family connection was immediately apparent. Shared facial features, similar educational background in Moscow, emergency contact information that confirmed their relationship. "Gentlemen," Victor announced to his team. His voice carried the excitement of a hunter who'd spotted the perfect quarry. "We've just discovered Elena Kozlov's greatest vulnerability. Her sister is walking directly into our operational theater, investigating the very story that could destroy them both." He studied Anna's photograph, noting the idealistic determination in her eyes that reminded him of young psychology students who believed they could heal the world through understanding. "Begin surveillance immediately. I want to know everything about Elena Kozlov. Her sources, her methods, her emotional triggers. And more importantly, I want to control the story she discovers." Back at Forward Operating Base Meridian, Elena received word of the journalist's assignment with the fatalistic resignation of a soldier who'd learned to expect the worst. The irony was almost too perfect to be coincidental. At the moment when she most needed anonymity to rebuild her confidence, the military was forcing her into the spotlight to counter enemy propaganda. David found her in the communications bunker, staring at intelligence reports with the 1,000-yard stare of someone processing too much information at once. "Helena, you okay? There's a journalist coming tomorrow. Embedded coverage of sniper operations, specifically interested in the Angel of Death story." Elena's voice carried the flat affect of shock. "Of all the war correspondents in the theater, they send someone who wants to write about the myth I can't maintain anymore." "Maybe it's an opportunity," David suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it himself. "Chance to control the narrative. Tell your version of the story." Elena's laugh held no humor. "David, I don't even know what my version of the story is anymore. Yesterday, I was the Angel of Death, legendary sniper whose reputation preceded her into every mission. Today, I'm Elena Kozlov, traumatized soldier who misses shots because she's second-guessing herself. Which version do you think makes better copy?" The next morning, Anna arrived at Forward Operating Base Meridian with the nervous energy of a journalist who sensed a major story waiting to be uncovered. Her first interview was with Staff Sergeant Jake Matthews, the sniper who'd questioned Elena's abilities during the previous day's mission briefing. "The Angel of Death?" Matthews seemed uncomfortable with the question, his eyes darting around the interview room as if searching for escape routes. "Look, ma'am, that's operational security territory. I can tell you about sniper tactics in general, training protocols, equipment specifications, but specific personnel information is restricted." Anna leaned forward, recognizing the evasive patterns she'd encountered in dozens of military interviews. "Sergeant, I'm not asking for classified information. I'm interested in the human story. What's it like to work alongside someone with that level of reputation? How does legendary status affect team dynamics?" Matthew's discomfort deepened visibly. "Ma'am, I think you'd need to speak with Colonel Reeves about that kind of thing. Personnel matters are above my pay grade." But Anna had been interviewing soldiers long enough to read between the lines. Matthews wasn't protecting operational security. He was protecting someone, and his reluctance suggested that the someone in question was closer than command wanted to acknowledge. Her next interview was with a communications specialist who'd worked support for multiple sniper teams. The soldier, eager to contribute to positive media coverage, was more forthcoming about general operations, but equally evasive about the Angel of Death specifically. "Hard to say what that particular operator is like as a person. Keeps to themselves mostly. Professional, but not particularly social. Works with the same spotter consistently, Lieutenant Chen. Solid soldier. They make a good team." Anna made careful notes, her journalistic instincts detecting patterns that didn't quite fit the mythology. The Angel of Death was described as private, professional, and closely partnered with a single spotter.
Not the stereotypical lone wolf assassin that enemy propaganda portrayed, but someone who valued partnership and consistency. That afternoon, Anna encountered David in the base cafeteria. His nervous energy was immediately apparent. The way he kept glancing toward exits, the tension in his shoulders when she introduced herself as a journalist investigating sniper operations. "Lieutenant Chen, I understand you work as a spotter for elite operations." Anna kept her tone conversational, non-threatening. "What's it like working with someone of the Angel of Death's caliber?" David's coffee cup rattled slightly against the table as he set it down. "Ma'am, I'm not authorized to discuss specific operational partnerships, but I can tell you that our sniper teams are the best trained, most professional marksmen in the theater." "Of course, but surely you can speak generally about what makes a good sniper-spotter team, the personal qualities that contribute to effectiveness." Something in David's expression shifted, a mixture of protectiveness and pain that Anna recognized from interviews with soldiers discussing fallen comrades. "Trust," he said, quietly. "That's what makes a good team. Complete, absolute trust. When you're lying in a hide for 16 hours waiting for one perfect shot, you need to know your partner has your back no matter what." Anna nodded, making notes that captured not only David's words, but the emotional subtext. "And do you have that kind of trust with your current partner?" David's silence stretched long enough to become an answer itself. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested personal investment beyond professional duty. "My partner is going through a difficult time right now. Question is whether that trust can survive when everything else gets stripped away." That evening, Anna reviewed her notes in the temporary quarters she'd been assigned, patterns emerging from the fragments of information she'd collected. The Angel of Death wasn't the mythological figure portrayed in either Allied propaganda or enemy broadcasts. This
Someone real, human, struggling with very personal challenges that affected their professional performance. More importantly, this was someone whose colleagues were protective in a way that suggested deep personal bonds rather than mere professional respect. Anna had interviewed enough military units to recognize the difference between soldiers who worked together and soldiers who cared about each other. As she organized her research, one detail from David's interview kept nagging at her consciousness. Something about his phrasing, the way he'd said, "my partner," with such personal investment, reminded her of something familiar. But the memory remained just beyond reach, like a word on the tip of her tongue that refused to surface. Meanwhile, Victor's surveillance team monitored Anna's every movement, tracking her interviews and analyzing her research methods. His psychological profile of Elena's sister was growing more detailed by the hour, revealing a journalist whose investigative instincts could uncover truths that would serve his purposes perfectly. "Sir," his aide reported, "Elena Kozlov is asking all the right questions to eventually discover her sister's identity. Her journalistic methods are thorough and systematic. At her current pace, we estimate she'll piece together the connection within 72 hours. Victor smiled with the satisfaction of a chess player who'd successfully maneuvered his opponent into checkmate. Perfect. When she discovers the truth, she'll become the perfect weapon against Elena's remaining psychological defenses. Nothing destroys a soldier's effectiveness quite like realizing their family is in danger because of their own choices." Anna fell asleep that night with her notebook beside her pillow, filled with fragments of a story that felt both familiar and foreign. Tomorrow she would continue her investigation, unaware that every question she asked brought her closer to a truth that would change both her life and her sister's forever. Anna's discovery came at 03:47 a.m., in the quiet moment between sleep and wakefulness when her subconscious mind finally assembled the puzzle pieces her journalist's instincts had been collecting. She sat bolt upright in her narrow bunk, David Chen's words echoing in her memory. "My partner is going through a difficult time right now." The way he'd said it, the protective concern in his voice, it was exactly how Elena used to speak about her Olympic training partners when they faced personal crises.
Elena. Here. The angel of death. Anna's hands shook as she retrieved her notebook, cross-referencing details with the methodical precision that had made her career. The timeline aligned perfectly. Elena's disappearance from Moscow 3 years ago, citing military service with no specifics. The Angel of Death's first confirmed kills appearing like a ghost in the same theater where Elena had supposedly been assigned to communications. The voice modulator would explain why no one had heard the legendary sniper speak without electronic distortion. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She'd been investigating her own sister. Anna's secure communication device buzzed with an incoming message, the timestamp showing 03:51 a.m. Too early for routine correspondence, too late for social pleasantries. Her blood ran cold as she opened the encrypted text. Ms. Kozlov, your investigation into the Angel of Death has been noted with great interest. Perhaps we should discuss your findings before you publish anything regrettable. There are coffee shops in Prague that serve excellent discussions about family members in dangerous occupations. A concerned reader. The message included a photograph that made Anna's breath catch in her throat. Elena in civilian clothes, clearly taken from surveillance footage, with crosshairs digitally superimposed over her face. The implication was unmistakable. They knew about Elena, they knew about Anna's investigation, and they were prepared to use both sisters against each other. Anna's journalistic training warred with her protective instincts as she processed the psychological manipulation. Someone had been monitoring her investigation, allowing her to discover Elena's identity, then leveraging that knowledge to control both sisters. It was sophisticated, calculated, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Meanwhile, Elena was experiencing her own awakening, not from sleep, but from the tactical briefing that would define her morning. Colonel Reeves's voice carried unusual tension as he outlined the day's mission parameters. Intelligence indicates enemy sniper activity in Grid Sector 77. Multiple Allied casualties over the past 48 hours, all consistent with expert marksmanship at extreme range. He activated the tactical display showing positions marked with red crosses where soldiers had fallen. Command believes we're dealing with an elite asset, possibly their response to recent developments. Elena studied the kill pattern with professional interest, noting the precision, the strategic positioning, the psychological impact of each elimination. This wasn't random violence. It was targeted assassination designed to demoralize Allied forces while demonstrating enemy capability. "Sir," Elena said quietly, "this looks like mirror tactics. Someone studying our methods and turning them back against us." "Exactly, which is why we need the Angel of Death to respond appropriately." Reeves's use of her operational codename felt heavy with expectation, as if saying it out loud could restore the psychological armor that had been stripped away.
But as Elena prepared for what would become the most challenging sniper duel of her career, her secure communication device delivered news that shattered her tactical focus entirely. Anna's message was brief, encrypted, and absolutely devastating. "Elena, I know. And someone else knows that I know. We need to talk immediately. I'm in danger because of your identity, and you're in danger because of mine. A." Elena's hands clenched involuntarily around the device, her carefully maintained emotional control fracturing like glass under pressure. Anna was here, in the operational theater, investigating the Angel of Death story without realizing she was putting both their lives at risk. Worse, enemy intelligence had identified Anna as leverage against Elena's effectiveness. The psychological trap was perfect in its cruel precision. Elena could either maintain operational security and leave Anna vulnerable to enemy manipulation, or she could protect her sister and compromise her military position. There was no choice that didn't involve sacrifice.
No tactical solution that preserved both professional duty and personal loyalty. David found her in the equipment bay, staring at her rifle with the blank expression of someone processing impossible decisions. "Elena, you look like you've seen a ghost." "My sister is here. She's the journalist investigating the Angel of Death story, and she's figured out it's me. Enemy intelligence is using her as leverage." David's face went through several expressions: surprise, concern, calculation, and finally grim understanding. "What do you need?" The simple question, offered without judgment or hesitation, reminded Elena why their partnership had survived 3 years of impossible missions. David's loyalty wasn't conditional on her maintaining the Angel of Death mythology. It was based on the person she'd always been underneath the tactical mask. "I need to protect her without compromising the mission, and I need to eliminate whoever's been hunting our people before they kill someone else." Elena's voice carried new determination, different from the perfectionist drive that had defined her Olympic career, but equally focused. "Can you track the enemy sniper's position from the kill pattern?" David was already activating his tactical computer, overlaying ballistic trajectories across the regional map. "Based on angle and impact analysis, I'd estimate shooting positions somewhere in the industrial district. Multiple potential hides, excellent fields of fire. Whoever this is, they know their business." 200 kilometers away, Sergeant Yuki Tanaka adjusted her rifle's scope with the methodical precision of a master craftsman fine-tuning an instrument. Her position in the abandoned steel mill provided commanding views of 3 Allied supply routes, with multiple escape paths and concealed firing positions. She'd been hunting the Angel of Death for 6 weeks, studying captured footage, analyzing tactical reports, preparing for a confrontation between equals. Yuki's assignment had been specific: capture or eliminate the legendary Allied sniper, preferably after demonstrating superior skill to demoralize enemy forces. But as she'd researched her target, professional respect had replaced simple military duty. The Angel of Death's tactical innovations, shot placement, and operational discipline represented excellence that transcended national boundaries. When intelligence had revealed Elena's gender, Yuki's perspective had shifted again. Not because women couldn't be exceptional soldiers, Yuki's own career had proven otherwise, but because Elena had achieved legendary status while concealing a fundamental aspect of her identity. The psychological strength required for such deception commanded respect from someone who understood the unique pressures faced by female warriors. "Target acquired," Yuki whispered into her communication device as Elena's position became visible through her scope. "Range, 1,400 meters. Wind, variable cross pattern. Engaging." Elena felt the bullet's passage like a whisper of death, the round striking concrete centimeters from her head with precision that made her own recent miss seem amateurish by comparison. Her tactical mind cataloged the shot's characteristics: range, angle, timing, while her survival instincts drove her into cover behind the reinforced wall. "Sniper!" Elena's warning crackled through the communications. "Northeast, elevated position, approximately 1,400 meters." Elena's scope found the enemy muzzle flash through the industrial maze, a brief flicker of light that revealed their adversary's position. At this range, atmospheric conditions would affect bullet trajectories significantly, requiring calculations that pushed marksmanship into the realm of applied physics. "I have you," Elena murmured, her crosshairs settling on the window where death waited with professional patience. The duel that followed lasted 17 minutes and covered 6 different firing positions as both snipers maneuvered for advantage while maintaining contact. Elena's shots were technically perfect, but somehow predictable, as if her adversary could anticipate her tactics. In return, the enemy sniper demonstrated skill levels that matched Elena's own, combined with an intuitive understanding of her psychological state. "Whoever this is," Elena told David during a brief repositioning, "they've studied me, my patterns, my preferences, maybe even my recent psychological profile." "Can you take them?" David's question carried weight beyond tactical assessment.
Elena considered the question honestly, weighing her current capabilities against an opponent who seemed to match her skill while possessing advantages in psychological preparation and strategic positioning. Maybe.
but not without risk I can't afford right now. The enemy sniper seemed to reach the same conclusion because the next shot came with a message attached, literally. The bullet embedded itself in the concrete beside Elena's position with a small cylinder containing a handwritten note wrapped around the projectile. "Worthy adversary," the note read in precise English, "your reputation was earned through skill, not propaganda. When circumstances permit, we should meet as equals rather than enemies. Yuki Tanaka, Imperial Sniper Corps." Elena stared at the note, processing implications that extended far beyond immediate tactical concerns. Her enemy had revealed not just professional respect, but personal identity, a gesture of honor that transcended the ugly propaganda war surrounding Elena's exposure. More importantly, Yuki Tanaka had confirmed what Elena desperately needed to believe. Her abilities were real, her reputation earned through competence rather than mythology. The validation came from the most qualified source possible, someone whose own skills made them worthy of respect. But as Elena processed this unexpected gift from an enemy, her communication device delivered another message from Anna, this one carrying panic beneath its professional phrasing. "Elena, they know where I'm staying. Someone's been in my room, gone through my research. I'm scared. Please tell me what to do." Elena's protective instincts overrode tactical considerations as she realized the psychological trap was closing around both sisters. Victor's campaign had evolved beyond attacking her professional competence. Now he was threatening her family directly, using Anna's investigation as the weapon that could destroy them both. "David," Elena said, her voice carrying new urgency, "I need immediate transfer to Anna's location. Request emergency extraction from current operation." David's expression showed he understood the implications. Requesting transfer would expose Elena's personal vulnerability to enemy psychological warfare, potentially compromising her fitness ratings and operational status. But it would also protect the person who mattered more to Elena than any military mission. "Copy that," David replied without hesitation. "I'll file the request immediately." "But Elena, this is exactly what they want, forcing you to choose between duty and family." Elena was already packing her equipment, her movements efficient despite the emotional chaos beneath. "Then maybe it's time to stop giving them what they want and start giving them something they don't expect." As she prepared to abandon her current mission in favor of protecting Anna, Elena made a decision that would define the remainder of their psychological war. She would no longer fight Victor's campaign on his terms, accepting the role of vulnerable target he'd assigned her. Instead, she would become something more dangerous than the Angel of Death had ever been, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The hunter was about to become hunted, but Elena intended to redefine what that meant. Elena's request for emergency transfer hung in the digital ether for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds before Colonel Reeves' response arrived, marked with priority encryption that indicated high-level attention. The delay itself was suspicious. Routine transfer requests typically received acknowledgement within 60 seconds, not enough time for the kind of consultation that Elena's tactical mind suggested had just occurred. "Transfer denied pending operational assessment. Report to Colonel Reeves immediately for mission parameters discussion. Time sensitive. Command." David caught Elena's expression as she processed the message, recognizing the micro-expressions that indicated tactical analysis shifting into overdrive. "What is it?" Elena replied, her voice carrying the flat certainty she'd learned to trust during 3 years of life-and-death decisions. "Something's wrong. My transfer request went up the chain too fast and came back too slow. Someone was consulted who shouldn't have been involved in routine personnel movements." Elena's mind began cataloging anomalies with a systematic precision that had made her legendary. The failed extraction mission that exposed her identity. How did enemy forces know their exact exit route? The sophisticated surveillance drone positioned perfectly to capture her unmasked face. Why had it been in precisely the right location at the critical moment? Victor's immediate propaganda response. How had enemy intelligence processed and distributed her image within hours of capture? "David, I need you to do something that might get us both court-martialed. I need you to help me investigate our own command structure." David's expression shifted from concern to grim understanding. Investigating superior officers without authorization constituted insubordination at minimum, treason under certain interpretations of military law. But his loyalty to Elena had been forged through shared danger and mutual trust that transcended regulatory considerations.
"What do you need?" he asked, echoing the same question that had defined their partnership through countless operations. Elena activated her tactical computer, pulling up mission records from the past 6 months with the forensic attention she'd once applied to ballistic calculations. Start with communication logs from the extraction mission. Cross-reference transmission times with enemy response patterns. Look for anything that suggests our tactical plans were compromised before implementation. The investigation consumed the next 3 hours, conducted with the clandestine intensity of a counterintelligence operation within their own base. Elena's systematic analysis revealed patterns that chilled her professional blood. Communication delays that corresponded to enemy tactical advantages, mission parameters that seemed designed to expose her to maximum risk, intelligence briefings that contained subtle inaccuracies favoring enemy positioning. "Elena," David said quietly, his voice carrying the tone reserved for devastating revelations. "Look at this communication timestamp. Your mission briefing was transmitted to higher command 17 minutes before you received it. But there's another transmission, same timestamp, different recipient code." Elena's screen displayed the damning evidence. Her mission parameters had been sent simultaneously to both Allied command and an encrypted recipient whose identity was concealed behind multiple security layers. Someone within their operational structure had been feeding her tactical information directly to Viktor Petrov. "Who has access to mission briefings at that classification level?" Elena asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Command staff only. Colonel Reeves, his aide Major Harrison, and the communications officer Captain Martinez." David's fingers worked across the keyboard with the skill that had made him invaluable as his spotter. "But, Elena, if one of them is compromised, then my entire career has been orchestrated," Elena finished, the implications cascading through her consciousness like dominoes toppling in sequence. Every mission, every tactical decision, potentially manipulated by someone who's been feeding information to Viktor Petrov. The revelation transformed Elena's understanding of her own service record. Had her legendary accuracy been enhanced by intelligence that positioned her for optimal shots? Had enemy targets been deliberately exposed to create the mythology surrounding her abilities? The questions attacked the foundation of her professional identity with surgical precision. Elena's secure communication device buzzed with another message from Anna, this one carrying barely controlled panic beneath its journalistic professionalism. "Elena, someone broke into my room last night. They didn't steal anything. They left things. Photographs of you in tactical gear, mission reports with your real name highlighted, evidence that proves you're the angel of death. It's like they want me to have the story. Why would enemy intelligence help my investigation? This doesn't make sense." Elena stared at the message, her tactical mind processing implications that extended beyond immediate security concerns. Viktor wasn't trying to prevent Anna's story. He was orchestrating it, controlling the narrative to serve his psychological warfare objectives. Anna's investigation had become another weapon in Viktor's campaign against Elena's effectiveness. "David, we need to access Colonel Reeves' classified communication logs. Tonight, when the command bunker is minimally staffed. If there's a double agent in our command structure, I'm going to identify them before they can do more damage." That evening, Elena and David executed their unauthorized investigation with the precision they'd applied to sniper operations. The command bunker's security protocols were designed to prevent external infiltration, not internal reconnaissance by personnel with legitimate access credentials.
Elena's command codes granted entry to classified databases that contained communication logs spanning the entire duration of her service. The evidence they discovered was both more and less than Elena had feared. Colonel Reeves' communication patterns showed no suspicious anomalies. His messages followed standard military protocols. His timing matched operational requirements. His content contained no obvious intelligence leaks. But his aide, Major Harrison, presented a different profile entirely. "Elena, look at this communication timestamp." Harrison's personal messages show timing correlations with every major compromise of your operational security, and his background check has some interesting gaps. Claimed education credentials that don't match university records, military service history with classification levels that prevent verification. Elena studied Harrison's personnel file with growing clarity, pieces of a psychological puzzle finally assembling into a coherent picture. The major had been assigned to Reeves's staff 8 months ago, shortly before the pattern of intelligence leaks had begun. His recommendations had influenced several mission parameters that had exposed Elena to maximum risk. Most importantly, he'd been present during every briefing where her tactical plans had been discussed. He's not just feeding information to Victor, Elena realized, her voice carrying the cold certainty of professional recognition. He's been shaping my missions to serve Victor's psychological campaign, the failed extraction, the exposure incident, even my recent missed shots. Harrison's been manipulating operational parameters to create maximum psychological pressure. The investigation revealed one final piece of evidence that completed Elena's understanding of the conspiracy against her. Harrison's communication logs showed encrypted messages sent to external recipients immediately after each of Elena's psychological evaluation sessions.
Captain Ruiz. Victor hadn't just been responding to Elena's exposure. He'd been receiving detailed intelligence about her psychological state, her vulnerabilities, her emotional triggers. "David, we need to—" Elena's words were cut off by the sharp click of the bunker's security lock engaging, followed by footsteps that suggested multiple personnel entering the facility. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the command center in red that made everything look like a crime scene. "Sergeant Kozlov, Lieutenant Chen." Colonel Reeves's voice carried disappointment and official authority in equal measure. "Step away from the classified terminals immediately." Elena turned to face her commanding officer, noting that Major Harrison stood beside him with an expression of professional concern that now seemed obviously manufactured. Behind them, military police waited with the patient attention of soldiers prepared to enforce whatever decision their superiors reached. "Sir," Elena began, but Reeves cut her off with a gesture. "You're both under arrest for unauthorized access to classified materials and violation of operational security protocols. Major Harrison, please escort them to the detention facility while I assess the extent of their security breach." As military police placed Elena and David in restraints, Harrison's brief smile was visible only to Elena, a moment of professional satisfaction that confirmed everything she'd discovered about Victor's role in the conspiracy. The psychological trap had closed with perfect timing, turning Elena's investigation of the double agent into evidence of her own disloyalty. But as they were led from the command bunker, Elena caught David's eye and saw her own determination reflected there. They'd identified the source of the intelligence leaks, even if they couldn't act on that knowledge immediately. More importantly, Elena finally understood the scope of Victor's campaign against her. This had never been about propaganda or psychological warfare alone. Viktor Petrov had been orchestrating Elena's entire military career, using Harrison to manipulate her service record, her mission parameters, even her psychological evaluations. The Angel of Death hadn't been destroyed by enemy propaganda. She'd been created by it, shaped and molded to serve Victor's ultimate objective. Meanwhile, in his intelligence center, Victor received Harrison's encrypted report with the satisfaction of a chess master executing a combination planned months in advance. Elena's investigation had proceeded exactly as anticipated, revealing the double agent just late enough to implicate Elena herself in security violations. "Sir," Victor's aide reported, "Elena Kozlov and her spotter are now in military detention, charged with security breaches. Harrison reports that their investigation discovered his role, but their credibility has been compromised by the unauthorized access charges." Victor smiled, studying Elena's photograph with renewed appreciation for his own strategic planning. Perfect. Now Elena faces the impossible choice between accepting court-martial for investigating her own betrayal or revealing classified information to prove her innocence. Either way, she'll be neutralized as an operational asset. But Victor's greatest miscalculation was assuming that Elena's loyalty to military protocol would override her protective instincts towards Anna. He'd created the perfect psychological cook pressure, but he'd underestimated what Elena might become when every conventional option had been stripped away. As Elena sat in her detention cell, processing the full scope of the conspiracy that had shaped her adult life, she made a decision that would transform her from a legendary sniper into something far more dangerous, a woman who discovered that the system she'd served had been corrupted from within, and who possessed both the skills and the motivation to do something about it. The Angel of Death had been a myth created by others for their own purposes. Elena Kozlov was about to become something entirely real. The detention cell's steel door opened at 0230 hours with the soft hydraulic hiss that Elena had been anticipating for the past 6 hours. Captain Sofia Ruiz stood in the doorway, her expression carrying the professional neutrality that Elena now recognized as carefully maintained psychological armor. "Sergeant Kozlov, you have 60 seconds to decide whether you trust me enough to save both your sister's life and your own career." Elena was on her feet instantly, her body responding to the urgency in Sofia's tone despite the restraint still binding her wrists. "What's happened to Anna?" "Viktor Petrov has her. Public ultimatum broadcast 20 minutes ago. Anna Kozlov's life in exchange for Elena Kozlov's surrender. He's forcing you to choose between your sister and your military oath. But I have a better option." David stirred from his position on the narrow bunk, immediately alert despite having been awakened from exhausted sleep. "Captain, with respect, breaking us out of detention is the only way to prevent Victor from destroying both Kozlov sisters. Harrison's already fled the base, disappeared during the shift change, along with classified intelligence that Colonel Reeves estimates will compromise Allied operations for months." Elena processed this information with tactical precision, while Sofia removed her restraints. "Where is Victor holding Anna?" "Industrial sector, grid 77. Same area where Sergeant Tanaka has been operating." Sofia's expression carried grim understanding. "Victor's forcing a three-way confrontation. You, Yuki Tanaka, and him, with Anna as the prize. It's psychological warfare designed to destroy you no matter what choice you make." Elena was already moving toward the door, her mind shifting from detention protocols to operational planning. "Sofia, why are you helping us?" "Because I've spent the last week evaluating your psychological profile, and I know something Victor doesn't." Sofia handed Elena her confiscated equipment, each piece carefully maintained despite the security breach charges. "You're not the Angel of Death anymore. You're something more dangerous. A woman who's discovered that her entire identity was manipulated and who's decided to stop playing other people's games." The escape from Forward Operating Base Meridian took 17 minutes and required Elena to employ skills she'd learned during 3 years of operating behind enemy lines. But as they moved through the pre-dawn darkness toward Victor's chosen battlefield, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced since her Olympic days: complete clarity of purpose. "Elena," David said as they approached the industrial sector, "Yuki Tanaka's out there. She's been waiting for this confrontation." Elena checked her rifle's scope alignment with movements that had become ritual over thousands of operations. "Good.
I need to prove something to myself before I face Victor. The urban canyon stretched before them like an arena, abandoned factory buildings providing multiple sniper positions across a battlefield designed for psychological warfare rather than tactical advantage. Elena could feel Yuki's presence like a physical weight, professional recognition between equals who'd finally found their perfect opponent. "Yuki?" Elena called across the industrial wasteland, her voice carrying without electronic modulation for the first time in 3 years. "You said you should meet as equals. I'm ready." The shot came immediately, not aimed to kill, but to test. Elena's response was instinctive, her rifle speaking with authority that came from skill rather than reputation. This wasn't about mythology or propaganda. This was pure marksmanship between two professionals who respected each other enough to offer the gift of honest combat. For 20 minutes, Elena and Yuki engaged in the kind of sniper duel that would become legend among military historians. Precision meeting precision, skill answering skill, with mutual respect replacing the hatred that typically defined battlefield encounters. When Yuki finally spoke across the distance, her voice carried acknowledgement that Elena desperately needed to hear. "Your abilities are real, Elena Kozlov. Your reputation was earned, not manufactured. Now go save your sister." Viktor Petrov stood in the center of the abandoned chemical processing plant like a professor delivering a lecture, his voice carrying across the industrial wasteland with the confidence of a man who believed he'd achieved checkmate. Anna knelt 15 meters away, her hands bound but her eyes blazing with the same defiant intelligence that Elena recognized as their shared inheritance. Elena Kozlov, the legendary angel of death, or should I say, the carefully constructed myth that I helped create through Major Harrison's invaluable assistance. Elena emerged from the shadows with her rifle slung across her shoulder, hands visible, but ready. The confrontation Victor had orchestrated required her to appear vulnerable while maintaining tactical awareness, a psychological tightrope that demanded every skill she'd learned during 3 years of deception. "You wanted me, Victor. Here I am." Elena's voice carried none of the electronic modulation that had defined her legend, but the authority in her tone was purely her own. "Let Anna go. Your quarrel is with me, not her." Victor's smile widened with genuine pleasure, the expression of an academic who'd successfully proven a complex theorem. "But Elena, you still don't understand the elegant beauty of what I've accomplished. Your sister isn't just leverage. She's the perfect mirror to reflect your greatest fear." He gestured toward Anna with theatrical precision. "Anna Kozlov, idealistic journalist who believes in truth and justice. Elena Kozlov, legendary sniper whose reputation was built on carefully manipulated circumstances. One sister devoted to revealing reality, the other living a manufactured lie." Elena felt Victor's psychological assault like physical blows, each word calculated to reinforce the doubts he'd been cultivating for weeks. But Yuki's validation had restored something fundamental in Elena's understanding of herself, the knowledge that her abilities transcended the mythology surrounding them. "Victor," Elena said quietly, "you're right about one thing. I have been living a lie, but it wasn't the lie you think it was." She moved closer, noting Victor's micro-expressions with the same precision she'd once applied to reading wind patterns. "The lie wasn't about my abilities. Those are real, earned through years of training and thousands of hours of practice. The lie was hiding who I really am."
"Elena," David said quietly, "you know you'll never be anonymous again. Your real identity, your actual face, it's all documented now." Elena smiled, the expression carrying peace she hadn't felt since her Olympic days. "Good. I'm tired of being a ghost. It's time to be human." Victor's confidence flickered almost imperceptibly. "Elena, you're attempting to turn my own psychological techniques against me. It won't work. I know exactly who you are. A traumatized woman whose brother's death drove her to create an impossible identity." "You're absolutely right," Elena replied, surprising Victor with agreement instead of argument. "I am traumatized. I did create an impossible identity. But Victor, what makes you think that's made me weaker instead of stronger?" Elena's tactical analysis had identified Victor's fundamental vulnerability. His academic obsession with psychological theory had blinded him to the practical reality of what trauma could forge in the right person. You studied the angel of death as if she were a case study, but you never understood Elena Kozlov as a human being. The final psychological gambit came when Elena knelt beside Anna, placing her rifle on the ground in apparent surrender. "Victor, you win. You've proven that my reputation was partially manufactured, that my identity was constructed rather than natural. Now what?" Victor's moment of triumph dissolved as he realized Elena's surrender had eliminated his leverage entirely. Without the threat to Anna, without Elena's resistance to his psychological assault, his carefully planned campaign had no target left to destroy. "Now," Elena continued, rising with movements that somehow seemed more dangerous despite her apparent surrender, "you have to decide what to do with a woman who stopped pretending to be someone else." 6 months after Viktor Petrov's psychological campaign collapsed under the weight of its own complexity, Elena stood before a class of 12 female recruits on the newly established Advanced Marksmanship Training Facility. The morning sun slanted through reinforced windows, casting precise shadows across the concrete floor where young women learned to transform Olympic precision into military effectiveness. "Marksmanship isn't about becoming someone else," Elena told her students, her voice carrying the authority earned through years of actual combat rather than manufactured mythology. "It's about becoming more completely yourself than you ever thought possible." The training program had emerged from Elena's debrief with Allied Command, where she'd argued that female snipers possessed tactical advantages that military doctrine had failed to recognize. Smaller physical profiles, enhanced attention to detail, and psychological resilience that manifested differently than traditional masculine warrior archetypes, advantages that became magnified when properly developed rather than hidden behind constructed personas. The Angel of Death had become the most read piece of war journalism in the conflict's history, but not for the reasons Victor had intended. Instead of exposing Elena as a fraud, honest investigation had revealed the sophisticated psychological warfare campaigns that both sides employed against their own personnel. The story had earned Anna a Pulitzer nomination, and Elena a different kind of recognition, respect for her authentic abilities rather than fear of her manufactured legend. Instructor Kozlov asked Lieutenant Sarah Chen, David's younger sister who'd requested assignment to Elena's program, "How do you maintain accuracy under psychological pressure?" Elena considered the question with the same analytical precision she had once applied to ballistic calculations. "By understanding that psychological pressure is just another environmental variable, like wind or temperature. You account for it, adjust for it, but you don't let it define your capabilities." Colonel Reeves visited the facility that afternoon, his expression carrying the careful assessment of a commander evaluating an experimental program's effectiveness. Elena's training methods had produced remarkable results. Her graduates demonstrated accuracy rates that matched or exceeded traditional sniper programs, combined with psychological resilience that made them invaluable for operations requiring extended isolation. "Elena," Reeves fed as they reviewed training statistics, "Command wants to expand the program. 3 additional facilities, 48 students per cycle. You'd be looking at divisional-level responsibility." Elena studied the proposal documents while processing implications that extended far beyond military promotion. The Angel of Death had been a weapon wielded by others for their strategic purposes. Elena Kozlov, sniper instructor, would be something entirely different, a person whose value came from developing others rather than eliminating enemies. "Sir, I accept on one condition. No voice modulators, no tactical masks, no constructed personas. My students train as themselves from day one." David found Elena by evening on the facility's observation deck, watching her latest class complete night shooting exercises with precision that would have made her instructor's Olympic coaches proud. Any regrets about giving up the Angel of Death identity? Elena considered the question while watching her students demonstrate skills that were entirely their own. The Angel of Death was never real. She was fear and mythology wrapped around some genuine abilities. But these women, they're becoming something real, something that can't be destroyed by propaganda or psychological warfare. Anna's latest message had contained confirmation that Viktor Petrov was serving a 15-year sentence for espionage and treason, his sophisticated psychological warfare network dismantled by counterintelligence operations that Elena's investigation had initiated. Major Harrison had been captured attempting to cross into enemy territory carrying classified documents that would have compromised Allied operations for years. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.